DM Nicholas King along with Nate Dog. We're starting up the podcast again. It's our first episode back, and I will pass it over to my good buddy Nate Dog and give us an overview of what we're going to talk about tonight.
Hey guys, how's it going? This is Nathan here. You might know me as the character Thalion, crazy wolfman, red-headed guy. Tonight we're going to be going over a bit what's been going on in the last month or so that we've kind of been AWOL, and then we'll kind of transition over to kind of the comic, what's going on in these next few scenes. Talk about the action that you're going to be seeing in the next few pages, and kind of the style change. We've changed it up a little bit in how we're going to be running the comic. And Nick, he knows a little bit more about that than I do, but we're just going to be discussing the changes that we've made and what you can expect in the next few pages. With that, I guess we'll, Nick, if you're ready, we can get started.
I am sending out the links now to all the social media. Give me like 2 seconds. We can just, since it's been such a while, if you want to give like a quick intro to your character up till this point, maybe in the story, and I guess you could talk a little bit about how he arrived, kind of like in this world, so to speak, but maybe not go into too much detail with some of the spoilers
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah, so kind of a little bit of the background on Alien, as far as where we see him now in the comic. When we first started our D&D campaign, when I guess when Nick first started, he had two separate groups going at the same time, and the group I was in, it was just me and a couple of other guys. Um, we were probably a good few weeks behind the other group, but we were both running the same story, just two separate groups. And so where we start off with Thalion in the comic is he's just finished the original story arc of our original group, and like as we lost a few players in our group, we kind of combined the two groups together. So that's where you see Thalion kind of transition into this other dimension and join this other group. And it was kind of a awkward situation at first for me, joining this group of players that I've never even met. But it was all in good fun, and we all kind of came together and get used to it. And The rest, as you say, is history. Kind of where you see Thalian now is he's just kind of trying to find out what's going on, what's different, because there's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of differences, and that might be referenced to later in the future in the comic. But right now, he's just trying to figure out what's going on, what's happened, where he's at, who are these new people, where does he fit in, and so that's kind of where we see him now. Um, and The other characters here in the comic in the last few pages, like they've really taken him in, despite how weird he is. Because Thalian, as a character, um, he's really the outcast. He's lived his whole life in the woods. He's actually pretty feral, so he's not used to people taking him in. But given the situation, uh, he's uh, he's more apt to do so, as you've seen in the last few pages. He's a bit of a naturalist, as you've probably seen in the last few pages if you've been keeping up with us. Um, Prepare to see that more in the future.
Yeah,
uh,
unfortunately.
Yeah, he's a druid and he doesn't care. Yeah, so he follows the naturalist form pretty regularly. Um, But other than that, I can expect you'll see more of his combat abilities and his interaction with the other characters, and a bit of his story progression. And as the comic progresses in these next few pages, um, yeah. So that's kind of where Thalian's at. As far as the other characters, there was one other character, I believe, who transitioned over that we don't see in the comic.
Yeah,
Uh,
he should be coming up uh, in the near future. He should be showing up.
yeah, I think the way that whole dimension transition happened, it was whoever was closest to the gateway was transported first. And so the other character that was there with Thalion in the alternate dimension, like we'll sure to see him later on. Uh, and he's a pretty interesting character as well. I'm looking forward to seeing him portrayed in the comic.
Yeah, it should give me an opportunity to flesh out a little bit more. I actually spoke with David about that briefly. I sent him like a couple of sketches of the new character, and I kind of talked a little bit more about it because I want to flesh out more of the Incrillions, and he's going to be half of that. So it's going to give it a little chance to do that because we haven't really done that too much in the game either. Um, just because there's been a few interactions when we were over on Gatrium with King Matral, but it's been pretty much it so far. But that's in the actual game. That's way beyond this comic time. Um,
Yeah, and guys, and if you've only been following along with the comic, check us out on our website. We have a lot of the character backstories. I think there might be some player backstories, bios, and stuff. And there's a lot of there's some various stories that are
yeah.
written by myself, and a
Yep.
lot of backstory. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Yeah,
Yep.
so check us out. There's a lot of info down there. There's a few of our D&D game nights where we just
Yeah.
get together on Skype and play. Yeah, they're on the D&D videos. You can kind of catch some of our episodes. Tales from Malifor, that's kind of something I do. It's just kind of a look into the different NPCs, the different characters from this universe, from this world, this realm that we're playing in. And check it out. There's some pretty cool stuff in there. There's some of the
Yeah.
lore and stuff, kind of telling you about um, the lands that the action is taking place, some of the history, and all that stuff. So it's pretty cool. So check that out if you hadn't checked it out already.
Yeah. And we're steadily adding to it, and a lot of stuff may or may not can be revealed. Actually, if you just read the lore, there's been a few times where I sprung that question upon you guys during the game itself, but like if you're
Yeah,
kind of versed in the lore, like you can kind of sense what's going on, or at least have some backstory. It really helps make the world a difference in a lot of this stuff because it's a bunch of fantastical names and places, and it can be a bit overwhelming. But trying to I wouldn't say dumb it down in the comic, but try to keep it flowing a little bit, nicely. Everybody's wearing bright fluorescent colors, so it kind of they stand out, and it's easier to distinguish them because of their appearance. So I wanted to that was kind of the thing in the beginning that I wanted to really establish as far as the comics is, and as we can see from one of the older pages here, this is page 21 that was posted, a little over a month and a half ago now. But since the beginning, I wanted to, like, even if the characters were very far off, I wanted you to be able to know exactly who it was. And so with these bright colors and the features and everything, you can see who is who and who's what and who's doing what everything. So and in the beginning, I kind of went a little bit of a different way, like Nathan said earlier, is I kind of the it thing right now as far as comics and what I've noticed and have since gotten very angry with. As part of the other reason for the transition, especially if you watch my other videos on my YouTube channel. Is there's it's very very cartoony style, and I'm not going to name a whole bunch of artists' names, but I was trying to emulate some of the more famous artists as far as like comic creators from Image and Marvel, and a few from DC have this style, but it's kind of a loose, bouncy feel. Features are kind of enlarged, or just it's kind of fit the panel to tell the story a little bit better. But after doing like 22 pages of this, there was a few pages that I did that I wasn't extremely happy with because I wasn't drawing the way that I kind of saw them in my mind's eye. Like the way I kind of see them is still kind of in that sense, but it's more like in that group painting that I did of you guys, like that I show on most of the videos of you, like Thalian pointing and stuff. Nathan knows what
Yeah.
I'm talking about. I'll have to.
Right. Right.
But so I decided, I was like wondering if I could like emulate that at the same time maintain a good. Actually, this is the one I'm talking about. Like maintain that as close as I could to that, but still put it in comic book form, because that kind of it's striking, it's captivating. You want to look at this longer than you want to look at this, because
Well, and I think part of that is that there's so much detail and realism in that image there that you have of the four of us. I mean, there's a lot going on there, not just in uh, the characters, but like the action and like there's a lot that image says by itself, and the detail alone is pretty visually striking to me. Anyway, that's my opinion.
yeah.
I'm no artist,
But
but
yeah, yeah. The only thing that I was worried about in the beginning was being able to do it in a timely manner, and that is pretty much the big reason for the big long gap. Because about a month ago, I basically sent a message to the group. I was like, I kind of want to try something new because I wasn't so happy with the style, and we, kind of all decided like, all right, cool, let's let Nick run this and see what happens, what kind of goofy crap he comes up with now. And but I found a way to kind of speedily do that with the help of Dylan, who is currently doing the color flats for me, Dylan Smith. I hope he doesn't mind me using his full name. But Jess has been tagging him in all of the stuff on Instagram and Twitter. But he's been helping me do the color flats, which is basically I can kind of do a sneak peek maybe. Actually, I got it zoomed in. That's perfect. So he has been helping me do stuff like this, where he basically goes in and kind of roughly outlines the primary color of the figure, and it cuts down my time so freaking much. It's ridiculous, because I'd have to go in usually with this lasso tool, if it'll act right. Now my computer's going to be a douchebag. Basically, you have to go in and kind of like go around and highlight everything and then fill it with the color, and that's very very tedious and annoying, especially after you've drawn the whole thing. I don't want to zoom in too much on this page, because this is page 28 and 20. Which one came out today, Nate? Like 23. Like
23, I believe.
yeah. So yeah, I don't want to zoom out too much, but I was gonna paint on this a little earlier, maybe on stream for you guys. Um, but yeah, so this storytelling wise, I thought this was a very successful page, but as far as everything else, as far as color and detail, this was one of those weeks where it was probably like Tuesday, and I was like, oh yeah, the page is going to be done by Thursday, and I had to finish the color real quick. So it's very very flat. There's not much shadows, even though it's a nighttime shot. The silhouette shot, something that was done very quickly. I still think it works pretty well, especially since he's kind of got like a whole cowboy thing going on with the grass, which
Mm.
is kind of cool. It's actually this and this is probably my favorite two panels of this, but everything else was done pretty fast. Um, this, the very next page would be 22, which is the one that was also posted yesterday. It was kind of the end of the quote-unquote first issue, because the usual American comic is 22 pages long. So it's kind of an end of that style, and it was like a slow transition into the other ones, because you can see like it's a slight shadows and variations of like especially his armor here. I really liked how that turned out, and different like his skin, like the shininess of that slimy orc texture. So it was like it was an almost there type of thing, but it wasn't quite showing what was coming next. But I thought this page turned out fairly well, for the last style, and then that's kind of when we went into what it is now. But yeah, it's kind of showing the bandit Fal-El looking like a bad mofo, and I'm very anxious to show a little bit more of his backstory way down the road, and Nathan knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So, tell us, like, because we've all played through this. So, like these, so what you're seeing in the comic are actions in the game. So, like, tell us a little bit about how you decide like what images to use, like what part of the action, because when you play D&D, like it's very turn based.
Yeah.
And so, how do you transition uh, from what's happening in the game to the images that you choose for the comic, and like how do you tell that story through like using those images?
Well, I mean, we played this particular night about 3.5 years ago, somewhere around there at this point. So it's be impossible for me to remember all those details. But I do. There are like striking moments that happen even as a DM, where we've talked about this multiple times. Is when you're thinking about these events, you don't think of them as like I remember when Nathan was sitting in that chair and we were doing that. You're like visualizing these characters, how they're projected in your mind, and it becomes a memory in all of itself. It's pretty remarkable, I think. And
And so, what you're portraying on in the comic is flashes of your memories of the game.
yeah, that's my like best way I could draw it out, and the actions and different things. Um, There are slight variations as far as like the combat, since both dimensions in this at this particular time of the comic have already merged. There were other things that kind of played out that led into the Fal-El Elf Bandit incident. Um, but for the most part, all that is playing out just like it happened for not your group, but the other group. And
Right.
when it gets to the combat, most of that is just, um, except for like when the first shot's fired, that played out exactly like how it happened that night. But the other combat sequences, I kind of have to make up on the spot. I kind of vaguely remember who did the most damage at that particular point, because I mean there's a Dragonborn who's a fighter, and then there's an Orc Barbarian. So those big tank guys, they're going to do most of the damage. And so I remember that, and that's one of the pages I'm working on now with the big Orc slinging his axe around like Tanasan. He did a lot of damage that night. The rogue character, who is just as big as the Orc almost, Gerwald Jagger with the big bear head around his crotch. He actually did a lot, although he couldn't get his sneak damage bonus because they're kind of wide out in the open. They got ambushed, but they did a lot. I mean, in your version of this particular scene, you did a lot of damage. So I'm trying to incorporate that into this fight as well. But I really wanted that main standoff in this version to be between you and Philo, and that's gonna which you've seen some of those pages already, like, or some of the sketches I've done of those. So that's going to transpire as the fight progresses.
And I mean, and this is really like, as far as the campaign goes, I mean, this is really the first big uh, uh, adversary that we see. Like, this is really the first big encounter
Yep.
uh,
Yeah.
of the entire campaign. So,
Yeah. I always
uh,
try to make, especially the evil guys. I always try to make them like as interesting as I possibly can. And by that I mean like I try to make them I'll make you want to feel sympathy for them. And even though it
mm,
might not be that way at first, like I want you to feel it later on. Once you kind of have that, like, oh, like then you kind of think back, like, well, he was kind of a douchebag, but I get why
yeah,
he was
because
a
I
douchebag.
right, because I remember this guy, and I remember like where the story goes from here, and like
Yeah.
where all this was coming from. Like it was revealed way down the line, and it's one of them things where like you're playing, and it gets tied in to where you are now, and it's like, oh yeah, that's that guy. I like okay,
Yeah.
and so you kind of have that moment of, oh okay, wow.
Yeah, and that's it started
So maybe I shouldn't
with
have
him.
killed that guy. Like maybe I shouldn't uh, uh, did those things that I did to those people because they were really like this was the situation that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in y'all's defense, he made it pretty difficult to not want to kill him at this point, but he
True,
did have
true.
his reasons. But uh, yeah, so that's always been my goal with like creating villains. Like good guys are pretty easy, or other NPCs are fairly easy. You give them a little bit of a backstory, you give them like one or two little quirks, you're good. But like villains are very very fun. You got to give them
Well,
a
because
good motivation, and it can't just be Doctor Evil. I want to blow up the world or do whatever. It's got to be something pretty legit.
well, I mean, because villains, like the evil characters, I think there's there's so much stuff that's just interesting about those types of characters. I mean, me like in the D&D like campaigns, I whenever I get the opportunity to play the bad guy, I love it. And it's the same thing like if I'm doing a show, like I'm actually I don't know if I told you, but I'm actually cast in I actually get cast in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as Ulf,
Oh,
the
nice.
evil, yeah, the evil uh, wolf. Yes,
Yeah.
like who knew? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but like whenever you get those opportunities to play the evil characters, because they're so interesting, because there's so much there. Like, what's their backstory? What? Because no one's like usually. I mean, it is D&D, but
Right.
usually like the characters you run into don't start out that way. Uh, and so there's so much you can do with that, and it's just fun, just building those characters and stuff and learning about them because it really is. It's a learning process. Like the more because you have those characters that you expected to be just one shot characters that by just the roll of the dice survive.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, what else can I do with these characters? Like, and like the characters grow into something of their own making, kind of. Um, and yeah, I have no idea where I was going with that, but
No, no, yeah. No, yeah. Just crazy creative villains. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, this is like one of the first. I mean, well, it's not the first like time you see him looking like a bad mojo. He gets other appearances later on, but like it's a good final standoff for the last issue. Transitions slowly transitions to the new style, and then we kind of get the big reveal of like where I'm headed with the new style, which is the page that was posted today. Um, so it's kind of hinted at that they are surrounded. They have walked up, and it's still a little bit of a mystery as to whether or not Afrin has led them into a trap. Um, that was kind of another thing that I wanted to leave as kind of like a little side thing. You know, you're wondering about, because he's already mysterious enough. They walked upon this girl in a morgue that she reanimated a body back to life and was questioning the body. And so there's a lot of mystery around this girl. I mean, she's pretty insane, and she is wanted to talk to them about this incident with the troll that's to the north that bridges the gap between northern and southern Shavo. And so she has led them back to this her cabin to discuss this and possibly offer them a contract where they just happen to come upon all these elf bandits. So I think there's a little bit of trust issues there, and you kind of saw that in previous pages where Thalion's like, you know, who in the hell is out there?
Yeah, I'm not a very trusting person. I always expect the worst.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that I definitely want to touch on with her character, and with this particular shot, I just thought it was kind of a cool shot because his sword, Falael's sword, is pretty unique to him. Um, and I really wanted to get a close up on that, and also to give a foreshadowing that, like, but just by looking at it, like you kind of like see it kind of like in like the bottoms of certain panels, but now you're getting up close to it and you're seeing that it's starting to shimmer and shine a little bit, and you're like, okay, is this thing enchanted? And you also see that, you know, yeah, they are surrounded and they have archers like freaking in the trees. So it's a bad spot. Like if this was Oh Brother Where Art Thou, they'd be saying, damn, we're in a tight spot right now.
It's like, where's TJ?
um, but yeah, just as far as like style wise, I'm taking more of a painterly approach to these pages. I do them. I found a way to actually digitally paint the way I actually do oil paintings. So it's pretty unique. So I start off at a underpainting layer. I do everything in a monochromatic tone, usually grayscale, and then from there I kind of build up off of color, almost like a glaze, and I do that through Photoshop. And then after that I do like my little cool effects and whatnot, and especially like all this stuff, and then I get to paint the pretty night sky.
Yeah.
It's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. Turned out well. Whenever I got done with this one, I immediately sent it to him. I was like, look at this, look at this. Like, we're on to something.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think that level of just attention to detail is something that, like, from like just us talking about comics today is really missing, because there's a lot of detail in these things. Like you look at Vanathan and his armor, like you see the scales and the reflection of the moonlight in the scales and the different like color and all that stuff, and the sky shining through the trees. And I mean I mean it's a painting. Like I mean that's what it is. It's a painting. It's not. It's less of a comic and more of a painting.
Yeah.
It really is, and like.
Yeah, I mean that was the goal. There's been other artists that have done this, like Alex Ross and Paulo Referee. I can't remember his name. There's been a few other that actually like paint their panels and stuff. So I kind of really wanted to push that into this. I don't recall too many being fantasy based, especially not one to this scale. Most of them were superhero comics, and that's not to downplay them. I love superhero comics, but like this is like, it's like looking at those like fantasy novel covers, but like in comic book form on every freaking page is kind of what I want to create. And
Yeah.
like,
That's cool.
yeah.
That's
So I mean that's the plan. I'm slowly like uh, trying to refine this. I was very like loose in these first few pages that are going to be posted as far as like pencils, and we went straight into paint. But I have found ways since then to kind of refine that even better, so things are going to look um, a little bit more clean in the next few pages, and very action packed. All that is coming finally. Like, it was pretty exciting at first to get to draw like all the do the choreography and the action, and since it's been going on for so many pages now, I'm at the point now where I'm like, I kind of want to go back to where they're just talking for a little while.
Well, I mean, because there's some like I've seen the upcoming pages and stuff like this, the sketches and stuff, and I mean there's some, I mean they're like really intense, interesting stuff going on in those. So stay tuned, guys.
Yeah,
The whomever's watching.
yeah, we got a couple watching now, but
Oh, cool, cool.
I think from there
Yeah,
we're gonna I'll probably switch over and show a little bit of like underpainting stuff, and I won't zoom out too much because, like I said, I don't want to show too much of what's going on. Especially the panel above is where he's going a little crazy, so I don't want to show too much of that. Uh, but yeah, take it over, Nate Dogg, while I try to find my brush.
yeah. So I mean that's kind of where we are now. Like that's kind of the changes we've made. It's kind of what you have to look forward to in the next few pages. There's going to be a lot of action taking place, like we talked about. You know, we're finally getting into the combat sequences, and from what I've seen, you definitely have something to look forward to in the next few pages. And also story wise, you know, like Hick and I, we've played through this campaign in the last what 5 years.
Man, it's been a long time. Yeah,
It's
something
been a
like
long
that.
time, I mean, and so when you play a campaign, and if any of you who are watching are D&D players, I mean, you know, if you have an opportunity uh, to find a good group of people to game with, and a very good DM and a good storyline that is always progressing and always finding new and interesting things. I mean, you can really stretch out a campaign,
Yeah.
uh, and really build off a campaign. Like this is the first campaign, which I'm not there yet. Nick, you, I'm
Oh, it's like my
tad
dog's
bit
going crazy.
upset. But in the probably 15, 18 years I've been playing D&D. This is the closest I've ever been to level 20 because, you know, it takes a long time unless you rush through it to get to those higher levels. Uh, and like this is probably the closest uh, like I've been with like a character that I've played and all that stuff. But I mean, it is like there's a lot that happens throughout this campaign. And there's some really exciting moments, but there's also like some really heartbreaking moments, you know, like I mean, because throughout 4 or 5 years, you know, real life time, you know, like we go through some things ourselves, you know, so like still playing these characters through all that, you know, like react and grow like the characters do, but we do too, you know. It's like uh, you really get to see the characters and the players really progress through that time, you know, and it's really something interesting to me, at least. You know, other people might it's just a game, but to me, it's interesting how a character changes just throughout all that time and throughout all those experiences. And so, keep checking us out. Keep keeping up with the comic. I mean, and you can kind of see what we're talking about. We really appreciate those of you who check in on the comic, who enjoy it. Please feel free to share, tell your friends, join our page, you know, all that good stuff. Help support us because we really uh, uh, this is really something that we're like all enjoying being a part of, because we have put so much into these characters. Uh, that's some cool shadowing you're doing there, Nick.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it would have to be some cool stuff put in these characters after doing all the time and stuff we put into it. But yeah, I mean, that's the big thing that we're trying to do now is just build an audience, and we've got a pretty good audience on our Instagram, but we also have a page on Twitter and Facebook as well, and it's pretty easy to find. It's just at Malifor Comics. It should take you to that page pretty quickly, and I'll try to do a link in the description after I get off of here. I forgot to do it before we went live today. I was just kind of rushing to get this thing on. Yeah, we're gonna, like, the goal is to try to build an audience, and then eventually we want to actually put this in print, and with that there will be some extra additive, like, some short stories probably from Nate that he hasn't posted yet, and some more lore that I haven't posted on our other website, and probably some sketches and just various things that we're going to do. But eventually, once the audience is built up enough, I think as far as like doing full pages, my goal would be to kind of tone that down, and if the audience is big enough, and go just do print and just use the social media stuff as more of a like sneak peeks and like various stages, and talk about the game and do more of a promote thing. I think that's kind of what our goal should be as far as doing this, because print still is a thing. It's still nice to have a good comic book in your hand rather than looking at a digital screen. Yeah, but yeah, here comes the really sweet part, is when you go back in with some of these highlights, which is some fun parts, and really kind of do some of that stuff to give them a nice little cute nubs there. And with that, you can still see some of the pencil marks, and so that's part of the things I was talking about earlier, is about refining, which is things that I've been just cleaning up in Photoshop. But I found ways to not be so rough when I'm actually drawing it now. I'm just trying to be a little bit of a cleaner artist, I guess. Yeah, see, it slowly comes together that way, and then you just keep building upon it, and eventually you have a halfway decent looking work before you even know it. I got some happy trees over here in the background. That's kind of a sneak peek.
And then if you mess up, just turn it into a nice little bird,
Yeah.
tree, something like that.
Yeah, I could definitely do that. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Anything else that you want to add, or do you want to talk about the game or anything, or you want to talk about the comic, or you want to kind of wrap it up there? Because I think we've been going for about an hour, haven't we?
Yeah, probably close to that. Something. I think that's a good place to close it out for this week. Check out our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, website, all that good stuff. If you're interested in chatting with us, I think there might be a sign up on the website where you can kind of sign up on the Tales of Malifor and just kind of chat with us.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that. I believe I have that set up, but check us out on there. We'd love to hear your comments, feedbacks, all that stuff. What you enjoy, all that stuff is really motivating for us to hear y'all's opinions and stuff.
And for whatever reason that it's not set up, just any of the social media sites, you can just message us, and Jess, our social media manager, she'll get the message and try to reply back as soon as she can.
Yep.
All right, guys. I think we're going to wrap it up there. Have a good night.
Awesome talk. Yeah, y'all too. Y'all have a good night.